Welcome to the executive, 13th of October 2021. And without further ado, I shall pass over to Andrew and then follow on with a few other bits.
Thank you very much, members. Welcome to the executive on the 13th of October. Just to let you know that the meeting is being recorded and obviously held via Teams, and the meeting will make recommendations for the Leader of Council to take the final decisions in line with powers that have been vested to the Leader in the Constitution. If we do have any technical issues, we will adjourn the meeting, but hopefully everything will be okay, and we'll put a copy of the recording up on the Council's committee pages in the next couple of working days. If I could ask everybody to make sure that they're on mute, and if you do need to get the attention of the Leader of Council, if you could use the chat facility, please. Thank you very much. Over to you, Leader.
Right, thank you. I'm now going to go around each executive member in turn just to confirm that they can see and hear. And I'll start with myself, and I can certainly see and hear at the moment. Councillor Slocum.
Good morning, Leader. I am the Deputy Leader and also Portfolio Holder for Inward Investment and Growth, and I can see and hear everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Caswell.
Good morning. Mike Caswell. I can clearly hear and see everything.
Thank you. Councillor Doddridge.
Good morning, everybody. Councillor Lance Doddridge, and I can see and hear everything clearly. Thank you.
Councillor Andrew Gilling.
Good morning, everybody. Councillor Andrew Gilling, Portfolio Holder for Housing, and I can see and hear everybody very clearly. Thank you.
Councillor Janet Keane.
Good morning, everyone. Janet Keane, Portfolio Holder for Communities, Climate Change, Wellbeing, and I can see and hear everyone clearly. Thank you.
Thank you. And is Councillor Mark Healy present?
Doesn't look like it at this moment in time, Leader.
Thank you. I know he was on a train this morning, was trying to connect from the train on his journey up to London. So we'll keep a warm seat for him should he require it during the course of the executive meeting. Now I'll go round to officers here. I think Mr. Bamsey.
Good morning, members. Doug Bamsey, Deputy Chief Executive, and I confirm I can hear and see everything.
Thank you. Mrs. Turner. Good
morning, everybody. I'm Alison Turner, Strategic Director and Section 151 Officer. I can confirm I can see and hear everything.
Thank you. Mr. Hellard.
Good morning, Leader. Good morning, members. I'm Steve Hellard, Deputy Monitoring Officer. I confirm that I can see and hear everything. Thank you.
And Chief Executive.
Good morning, everyone. Bob Brown, Chief Executive. I can confirm I can see and hear everything.
Thank you. And we're also joined by Hilary Bruce today, who I'm sure can see and hear. Rose Stokes, leader of the two opposition parties, Mr. Granger, Dawn Lehman, and Dave Coles. And I think that's just about all the officers that will be connected, but I'm almost certain I've forgotten somebody, so I apologise. Right, moving on then to apologies. Andrew.
Thank you very much, Leader. If Councillor Healy doesn't attend the meeting or is unable to connect to the meeting, then we'll record his apologies, but everybody else is present this morning.
Thank you. Second agenda item is to confirm the minutes of the executive held on the 17th of March, the 14th, the 21st and the 30th of April, and the executive advisory meetings held on the 2nd of June, 14th and 28th of July and the 4th of August as a true and fair record. They've previously been circulated with the agenda pack. Are members content?
So moved, Leader.
Any opposition? Against? Abstention? No, thank you. Mr. Melhurish. Yep.
Thank you very much, Leader, and that's to confirm that the recommendation from the Executive Advisory meeting to you to sign the minutes of those meetings as a correct record in due course.
I would do that. Thank you very much. Moving on then to declarations of interest. Members, any declarations of interest in the agenda?
Yes, Leader. I feel I should declare a pecuniary interest in as an active member of the Axbrew Internal Drainage Board.
And which item?
Doesn't appear on the agenda specifically, but drainage boards in general, because
Yeah, I don't think you necessarily need to register anything as there's nothing on the agenda. Thank you. Anyone else? Right, no, moving on. Urgent business, I have none. Thank you. Public speaking, we have no members of the public registered to speak. But of course, councillors, as customary, will be allowed to speak as and when they wish to do so. Right, moving on then to agenda item 6, which is a recommendation from Community Scrutiny Committee on the fireworks policy. And I'm going to hand over to Councillor Bruce to present the recommendations. We're joined by Dave Coles and Rose Stokes.
Good morning, Leader, good morning, Executive. I'll give an overview of the report and how the committee reached these recommendations first before presenting them. So in November 2020, the council received a petition requesting the council limit the sale of fireworks to professionals only, to limit the nights that fireworks can be let off, and for all fireworks in Sedgemoor to only be used by licensed professionals. The petition ran for 3 months and received 87 signatories. Many councillors also received emails from the public as part of the RSPCA's Bang Out of Order campaign, encouraging local authorities to take action against the impact of fireworks on animals. In the February committee, the Community Scrutiny Advisory Committee met to consider what could be done as a council to reduce the impact of fireworks in Sedgemoor. Dave Coles, Sedgemoor's Coastal Environmental Protection Manager, gave the committee an overview of the role the council has, along with the restrictions and the RSPCA's campaign. Although the council has limited enforcement powers, it was agreed by the committee that it would be beneficial to create a policy to address how the council would reduce the impact of fireworks. The committee requested for Dave to put together a draft fireworks policy, outlining the council's position legally and the key points raised, including the advertisement of public displays and educating through public awareness campaign. The draft policy was presented to the Community Scrutiny Advisory Committee on the 6th of September 2021 by Dave Coles, and a few small feedback points were received from members of the committee, and I'd like to thank Dave very much for his work on this. As a local authority, we do not have any primary enforcement powers, which instead lie with the police with regards to the dangers of fireworks and trading standards with regards to the sale of fireworks. The draft policy intends to be educational and provide encouragement to lessen the impact of fireworks on animals, vulnerable people and the environment. It aims to encourage the public to attend organised events rather than using fireworks at home. Organised events are encouraged to advertise at least 7 days in advance to allow time for actions or precautions to be taken where possible for animals and vulnerable people. And it was felt that if more people attend public displays, it limits the overall impact. Where residents may use fireworks for private displays, the draft policy seeks to encourage the use of quieter fireworks, but not to limit for public displays. After much discussion, this approach was due to concerns that quieter fireworks at the public displays could result in the displays being avoided and more private displays taking place, increasing the overall impact of fireworks. This also matches the approach taken by the RSPCA, and according to them, with COVID-19 restrictions last year and the cancellation of public firework displays, a poll confirmed that 18% more people were actually holding private displays at home. The draft policy proposes requiring displays on council-owned land to use the policy as a guide when organising an event, and a copy of the policy to be included with booking forms. It also seeks for the council to educate the public on the impact of fireworks and precautions that can be taken through increasing awareness, including messages on social media. For example, encouraging those having displays at home to let their neighbours know and to use quieter fireworks where possible. Although the Council is limited in enforcement powers due to legislation, the Council does have a role in reducing the impact of fireworks on animals, vulnerable people and the environment. This policy would have a positive effect through raising awareness of the impacts and precautions and placing requirements on displays on Sedgemoor District Council land, which would also set an example for others to follow. In addition, by lobbying government to reduce the maximum permitted noise level of fireworks to 97 decibels, this would help the cause on a wider scale. The Community Scrutiny Advisory Committee voted to support the draft fireworks policy, with some amendments which have now been included in the policy within the agenda. The Community Scrutiny Advisory Committee recommendations to the Executive are to approve the fireworks policy and to lobby government to reduce the maximum permitted noise level of fireworks to 97 decibels, except those used for licensed public displays. So those are the recommendations presenting to the Executive this morning. Any technical questions on the policy, I'd like to refer back to Dave Coles if possible, but happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And I've got one speaker at the moment. Before I go to Councillor Keane, I'll just nip across to Dave to see if he's got anything to add. Dave.
No, I think Councillor Bruce covered it, you know, in pretty good detail.
Brilliant. Thank you. Councillor Keane.
Thank you, Leader. I entirely agree with everything that Councillor Bruce has said, and I would commend Dave Coles on his draft policy, which is Appendix A. The wording is exactly right. It is not punitive, it is informative, advisory, and does not in any way seek to spoil people's enjoyment. And I would like to propose that we accept the recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Slocum.
Thank you, Leader. I'd also like to thank Dave Coles. I think this is a very difficult one. I'm to some extent, I'm glad that we have no enforceable powers, because I think that as somebody that's grown up with fireworks, and probably maybe I should have declared as somebody that Bridgewater has been very much firework led, but on the licensed side of it, I do understand. I think it's a good guidance. I think it's a guidance that people need to have, perhaps, to be able to know what to do. But it is a guidance only, and I think we have to remember that. But the thing about the pets, I think ever since I've grown up, you know, you've always known to get pets in, but it's always a bit of a worry. And for somebody who does squibbing every year, and I've always been frightened of fireworks, I can't believe I do squibbing, but I think sometimes having the professional evening will be less perhaps hazardous, but I still think it's at people's choice. And I think we must never take that away from anyone. So I thank Dave for the way that this has been scripted. I think he's done a very, very good job. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you. Are you happy to second that?
I am happy. Yes,
yeah, thank you. Yeah, I too. I think it's a sign of the times and the shape of things to come on a number of issues with regard to fireworks. And I think it's important that we stand up and actually give some advice and guidance of how we think people should be behaving, much for their own safety as the safety of pets equally. Any other comments from members?
Leader, if I may, can I ask a question?
Councillor Gilling, is that?
It is, yes, thank you.
Okay.
Is there a possibility that this policy could be opened up a bit wider to include Chinese lanterns?
We already have a policy on Chinese lanterns, and certainly it's heavily discouraged them from release on council-owned land, which is about as far as we can go. But yeah. Right. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Bruce, any further comment to make?
No, nothing to add. Thank you.
Thank you. In advisory capacity, then I'll go to members. Are there any opposing views to the recommendations, the two recommendations before us today? Are there any abstentions? Then I take it everybody is unanimously in favour. Thank you. Mr. Melchior.
Thank you very much, Leader. Members, so the recommendation from the advisory meeting to you, Leader, is to approve the fireworks policy and then to lobby government to reduce the maximum permitted noise levels of fireworks. So over to you, Leader.
Thank you, and I'm happy to endorse that policy and sign the recommendation. Thank you. Moving on then to number 7, which is the recommendations again from the Community Scrutiny Advisory Committee on the 6th of September relating to the consideration of declaring an ecological emergency in Sedgemoor. And I'll hand over again to Councillor Bruce to give us the 1, 2, 5, 7 recommendations that are before us today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leader. On this item, following Sedgemoor recognising a climate emergency, there was a piece of commissioned research through Somerset Climate Action Network to establish the views of the public. Their report recommended for Sedgemoor to signal the renewed priority it intends to give to increasing biodiversity by declaring an ecological emergency. As a result of this, the Community Scrutiny Committee requested an overview of the purpose and implications from declaring an ecological emergency in Sedgemoor. A report was presented to the committee in March, and a proposal was made to put forward to full council to declare an ecological emergency. A cross-party task and finish group was set up to work alongside officers to draft the declaration. The group met on various occasions to develop this, and there was the opportunity for members to consult with their group, and revisions were made. Officers from other areas of the council also provided feedback from planning policy, environmental services and clean surrounds. I would like to thank all those involved in the task and finish group for the work undertaken, including the portfolio holder, Janet Keane. The Community Scrutiny Advisory Committee met on 6th of September 2021 to consider the recommendations from the task and finish group, along with some amendments suggested from officer feedback. I should point out that not all members were able to attend the meeting that day, including 2 members of the task and finish group. A presentation was provided by Christy Blackwell, the officer, highlighting the challenges and different approaches that could be taken on the recommendations, particularly whether the committee would like to recommend declaring an ecological emergency, recognising an ecological emergency, or whether to gather further local evidence before making this decision. There is evidence from the State of the Nature report that shows a decline in species and habitats nationally, and the Somerset Levels and Moors water quality has been downgraded to unfavourable and declining. The ecological decline is an internationally and nationally scientifically recognised problem, affecting not just protected areas and rare species, but total biodiversity and total bioabundance. Sedgemoor is surely not immune. However, we do not currently have a local evidence base to be able to establish the themes most relevant in Sedgemoor and what focuses would be needed for the action plan at this stage. There was an indication that the Somerset Environmental Record Centre could do some work on Sedgemoor's behalf to find local information. Without a doubt, it is important to understand what we are facing locally to help us understand where, what and the causes. Although some members felt there was a need to urgently declare an ecological emergency, the Community Scrutiny Advisory Committee voted to support the proposed recommendations, with an addition to point 2 calling for the local evidence to come back to members as soon as physically possible. It was felt that it was important to establish what needs to be done at a local level before a decision is made on declaring an ecological emergency, but also that it was essential to act swiftly and for work on the ecological strategy and action plan in partnership with Somerset West and Taunton Council to proceed without delay. The Community Scrutiny Committee's recommendation to the Executive are the 7 ecological emergency recommendations that you have before you in the agenda back. I think you'll all have read those, so I won't go through those in detail. I believe we have, I know we have Pete Granger here, Sedgemoor's ecological officer, and I don't know if Christy is here as well. So if there are any questions regarding this item, any technical questions, then please, I'm happy to answer questions for Christy or Peter here as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Both of the names are here, and welcome to you both. Christy, Peter, anything you wish to add at this stage?
As far as I'm aware, that was a super resume from Councillor Bruce. I don't really have a lot more to add to that, other than just to encourage councillors to be bold in their decision.
Thank you. Well, I think members are normally bold. Yeah. Thank you. Christy.
No further comment from me. Thank you, Leader.
Okay, thank you. Right, members, any comments or questions? I mean, I think this is something that is, again, sign of the times and needed. Grateful for community scrutiny and Hillary to undertake this work with the officers. I think it's an ideal opportunity to work with an adjoining local authority in order to get greater bang for our bucks, if you like, and I think that can only serve us well in the future. Councillor Slocum.
Thank you, Leader. I'm so sorry, my sound went off a bit, so apologies if I missed this. But could you tell me what local evidence have we come up as well? I know we're already doing many parts, and I know this is a very important agenda that we all want to be part of course we do. But could I just ask what local evidence? I attended the scrutiny meeting, and I know it was suggested that we before we agree, we go back for further local evidence. I just wondered if Christy could perhaps update us on the further local evidence, please.
Yeah, certainly, and please, Pete, pop in if you need to. But I'm commenting on Pete's behalf because Pete has actually done the work. But we have contacted Somerset Environmental Record Centre, CERC, to see whether they would be able to provide us with some information further to the requests made at Scrutiny. And they have come back to us to say that they can do a piece of work for us, which would include things like analysis of species trends in Sedgemoor, analysis of land cover change within Sedgemoor, analysis of habitat loss within Sedgemoor, to extract, clean and prep all of that species data and to visualise those results in a full report. We have been given a cost to do that and a time frame of around March 22 for completion of that full report.
Okay, thank you. So what we're saying is, if I may, Leader, you want us to go, we're approving this before we've had the evidence that was suggested at the scrutiny. Is that right?
I mean, that's one of the recommendations, yes.
Yes. I just wanted to clarify that point.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Keane.
Is that all? Thank you very much. I thank Councillor Bruce for such a well-balanced summary of this. I think members, if they don't know already, I would like to emphasise the fact that our many different departments within the council are already have reformed and thought forward to try and encourage ecological sensitive planning. For instance, our clean surroundings, they no longer use peat products in their gardening. That's one very small example. And I know that the drainage boards, their officers who maintain so many miles of riverbanks and waterway bankings and all the land surrounding it, they also are extremely sensitive to the habitats and how to manage without any form of destruction. There are two appendices with this, and they also are highly explanatory and extremely well balanced, and I think we are already very much on the way forward, and I would take great pleasure in moving these recommendations as they are all written here. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. Thank you. Members, any other comments or questions, please? Jill, is that another Jill?
Yes, it is another Jill, and I'd second that, the recommendations, Leader.
Thank you. Okay, if there's no further debate, I will ask members to make their comments known on the recommendations before them. 7 recommendations, and I look forward to Councillor Bruce and the Community Scrutiny team doing quite a lot more work by the look of it. And I'm very grateful for that. And that's exactly what Scrutiny Committee meeting should be doing, which is setting or putting forward policy for the council to adopt. And I'm very grateful for that. So members, are there any against? Abstentions? Therefore, take it as a unanimous decision. Thank you. Mr. Melhuish.
Yes, thank you very much, Leader, and that is unanimous. The 7 recommendations that are before you. I won't go through each one of them, but that's over to you now, Leader, to confirm.
I'm happy to confirm the 7 recommendations as soon as I can virtually sign them. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Leader,
And thank you, Councillor Bruce.
May I just add my thanks to Pete Granger and Christy for the work that they've done on this, and I look forward to continuing to work with them on this and seeing the evidence come forward as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Good.
I second that statement. Thank you to them both.
Thank you.
We have a limited timeline to get the work done because of partly due to the next report coming forward. So yes, I would certainly endorse the speed as much as we can under the circumstances. So thank you very much again, Hilary. Thank you very much, Pete, and thank you very much, Christy. Thank you. Moving on then to agenda item 8, which is a recommendation to establish a joint committee for Somerset for the implementation of the local government reorganisation. And I think you've got the executive summary there and the 2 recommendations that are before you. Without further ado, for more technical information, I'd like to hand over to the Chief Executive, Mr. Brown.
Thank you very much, Leader. I'm going to hand straight over to Mr. Hellard, who I think has got a brief presentation just to take us through the detail on this, and then I'll come in and perhaps just summarise after Mr. Hellard's finished. Steve?
Thank you.
Yep, thanks. Thanks, Chief Executive. Mr. Melhuish, I wonder whether you could share the presentation, please. I don't seem to be able to have. I don't seem to have the rights to be able to do that. Thank you.
Well, when you've been with the council a little while, you'll get those rights. Don't worry, Stephen. Yeah.
Thank you. Just while Mr. Melhuish is doing that, just an introduction to the report. As the leader said, the report seeks approval to the establishment of a local government joint committee on the terms of reference attached to the report. It's intended that the structural change order, which will take effect from March next year, will establish an implementation executive, and the role of that implementation executive will be to prepare and facilitate the transition to the new authority ready for April 2023. However, there are a number of actions and decisions that need to be taken in advance of the creation of that implementation executive, and the report therefore seeks authority for the joint committee to provide accountability and transparency for those decisions that need to be taken prior to the implementation executive. So thank you, Mr. Melhuish. So hopefully members can all see the presentation.
Yep, we can.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. So the first thing to say is obviously your role on the districts continues. It's business as usual until the 1st of April 2023, when the new authority will come into being. And as I said, the purpose of the joint committee is to oversee implementation of the new unitary council. It will, as I've said, only exist until the implementation executive comes into being in February or March. Sorry, that should be next year. So in terms of the composition of the joint committee, the terms of reference provide for there to be 9 members drawn from the county council and the 4 districts. Okay, so those 9 members are the leader of Somerset County Council, 4 other members of the executive of Somerset County Council. Those are to be nominated by the leader of the county council and the leader of each of the 4 districts. Okay, so you will see that that is a 5-4 majority in favour of the county council. That is something that is that has been reflected in implementation executives in structural change orders made for other unitary councils. So as best we can with these terms of reference, we're trying to reflect what is likely to be the position in the structural change order once the implementation committee is established. So we know from various other structural change orders that there will be a majority for the county council. Substitutes will be allowed. So in the event, for example, that one of the leaders is unable to attend, they will be able to nominate a substitute to attend in their place. Therefore, ensuring that we do still have representation when the leader is unable to attend. Can I have the next slide, please, Andrew? Thank you. Okay, so as you'd expect, each member will have one vote. In terms of the quorum, the terms of reference propose that the quorum be 5 members, excuse me, including at least 1 member from a district council. So there will always be a district council representative there. The chair will be the leader of the county council. Again, that reflects the previous structural change orders that have been implemented in relation to previous unitaries. Those have all provided for the leader of the county council to be the chair. Decisions, as you would expect, would be by a majority vote. The chair will have a second and casting vote if needed. Again, that's something that isn't unusual and is needed to potentially resolve any deadlock. The deputy chair will be appointed at the first meeting. There is no there's no prescription in the terms of reference as to who that needs to be. So it doesn't have to be a member of the county council. And the terms of reference provide that the county will administer the meetings. There is some ongoing discussion about that at the moment, and the thinking now between the councils really is that will need to be shared out, and there will be a role for the district democratic officers to be involved with those meetings and to get the experience of those meetings and the skills that come with administering those meetings. Next slide, please, Andrew. Thank you. In terms of the frequency of meetings, the terms of reference provide for the committee to meet at least monthly. The first meeting is aiming for next month, once obviously each of the authorities have approved the setting up of the joint committee. The terms of reference provide for either a majority of members or at least 3 district council members to request an extraordinary meeting. So an extraordinary meeting can be requested in between the ordinary monthly meetings. It's proposed that the venues of the meetings will move around the county. The key role really of the proposed joint committee, as I've said, is to prepare for and facilitate the economic, effective, efficient and timely transfer of the council's functions, assets, rights, liabilities and investments. Well, what does that mean? Well, it's broken down in a bit more detail there on the slide. So it will include functions such as overseeing the implementation plan, agreeing the level of requests to districts for financial contribution towards delivery, agreeing the form and function of the local community networks, agreeing the joint submissions to the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities. Although I should say there is an ability within the terms of reference there for any district member to dissent to a submission to the department. So we can record our dissent and have that noted if we don't agree with a particular submission that's being made. The role of the committee will also be to oversee the development of the constitution and schemes of delegation for the new authority. Obviously, that's a massive task. There's 5 constitutions at the moment. There will need to be one constitution for the new authority. Functions will also include the approval of plans to align all of the existing change activities, the development of policies and protocols for the new authority, and also to be consulted on each council's budget setting with the ability for the joint committee to comment on the each council's budget setting. Last slide, please, Andrew. Thank you. And then finally, it's also proposed that a joint scrutiny committee will be established. Obviously, if there's a joint executive committee, then there need to be the requisite checks and balances in relation to the decisions made by that committee. So there is a proposal for a joint scrutiny committee to scrutinise the work of the joint committee. The terms of reference of that committee are currently being drafted at the moment. There will, however, be representatives from each of the 5 councils' scrutiny committees. The role of that scrutiny committee, as you would expect, would be to scrutinise the work of the joint committee. As I said, the draft terms of reference are being drafted at the moment. They will be presented to each of the councils, and it will need to be a council decision, because obviously scrutiny is a non-executive function. So we're looking to present those draft terms of reference to the council at a special meeting next month, with a view to the first meeting of the Joint Scrutiny Committee commencing in December. That's all of the slides, members. I didn't want it to be death by PowerPoint, but hopefully that gives you an overview of the main elements of the terms of reference. But I'm happy to take any questions members may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Obviously, members can see that there is a growing and increasing amount of work to be done in the preparation for our new metamorphosis. But before I go on and take questions, I'll go to Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Leader. Just a couple of things to add to what Steve has said about the formation of this particular committee. It's important, it was felt, that we had formal arrangements put in place prior to the structural changes order, because that will bring in formal arrangements through a parliamentary piece of legislation for some of this decision making. But in the meantime, it's important that we have an ability to collectively make some decisions around the transition arrangements. The benefit of having a joint committee is that it will be a formal committee of all the councils, and it will need to comply with the 72 Act legislation in terms of transparency, meeting notices, publication of agendas and things like that. So it will be open and transparent. Members of the public will be able to attend, and you'll be able to see the business as it's transacted, and people obviously will have the right to come along and watch those debates unfold as they go forward. The DCA, the Department of Housing, Communities and Local Government, as it was at the time, made it clear that the arrangements that they expected to see and then have reflected in the structural change order was that whoever was the successful business case should take the lead. So hence the reason why the arrangements are set in the way that they are, is because the MHCLG made it clear that that's what the expectation was, and that's what would be reflected in the structural changes order. So the county does have a majority here. It is a bare majority, and the other arrangements, I think, ensure that the districts obviously have a say and have the right to call meetings and will participate fully. So substitutes mean that there won't be a situation that if a person can't attend, if one of the leaders can't attend, that one of the districts will be absent. So there should be an opportunity to have a full and frank debate in those environments. And as has already been said, there is a role for overview and scrutiny. So backbench members will get an opportunity to be able to call in matters and scrutinise the issues that are arising. And Melanie, I know through the lead in the governance group, is working hard on getting those terms of references with a timetable for getting that before each of the councils, so that those arrangements could be put in place and we can move swiftly to an opportunity for members to be able to scrutinise and call in issues as they develop. The last thing I think is worth saying before I close is that this report has gone to each of the councils. It's now been signed off by South Somerset in the terms that you've stated, and if we all sign those off, then we're hoping to have a first meeting in early November, so that we can start dealing with transition items in a formal way through these arrangements. So thank you very much, Leader. Happy to take any questions if needed.
Thank you. And I would just add that it's our intention to make sure that all members know the activity that's going on within this joint committee, so that they can make comment and feed them into me, so that I can represent their views fully at these meetings. Councillor Keane.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Brown has answered the first comment that I had, in that the the composition of the committee is 5-4 in favour of the county council. If it was left to me, I would not approve of that, because that's not a meritocracy. Mainly because over the past few years, there's different departments of the county council that have been found wanting in some of their delivery of services. And I don't recall any of the districts have receiving the same sort of criticisms or being special measures. And the later point that Mr. Hillard made about the almost an interference in each district council's budget setting, that seems to negate the original information that we were given long before the referendum, that there would be no interference in our sovereignty until the day we cease to exist. That strikes to me a very fundamental point. And as you've all outlined, it strikes me that the Scrutiny Committee will have an even more important role than perhaps any other role that they would ever have undertaken. And it's going to be very, very hard for them. But that's all I wanted to say. I'm not happy about it, but if it's the Secretary of State's decision that this must happen, then of course we must implement it. Thank you.
Yeah. And indeed it is, and you know, as we all know, the One Somerset bid was accepted, and as such, terms were laid out within that bid as to how things would happen. I think equally we have the ability to comment upon the county's budget setting as well. So it's a fairly, you know, two-way street on that. But you know, until we need to get the structural change order and the draft of that to see where we're going. But following on from the election next year, if it takes place, then we will be, as I've said before, more of a caretaker in our role for the last year, as we hopefully represent the services and our customers in transitioning those across to the new authority so that they are in the best possible state, and we don't lose any drop off in standards. Mr. Hellard.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I was just going to clarify for Councillor Keane that in relation to the budget, there's no issue with any sovereignty being lost. The council remains a sovereign body up until the new authority is in place. It's purely a case of the ability to comment on the budget, but any decisions in relation to the budget will be down to each individual council.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Right, then Councillor Smedley.
Yeah, clearly Somerset is in the driving seat, as you'd imagine here. Although having attended the parishes meeting the other day and several separate meetings with them, I'm not quite sure that they're not trying to sidle over into the passenger seat. That would be welcome if they were, because that would be more inclusive, which is something that's key in all this. The role of scrutiny in such a setup is very important. And in the balance that you've mentioned, yes, it's 5-4 county district. It's also 6-3 Tory Liberal. There's other parties around Somerset that clearly would want to be part of the scrutiny role there, and both the Labour Party and the Green Party, I would have said, would want to be featured in that. I know Greens feature on the county scrutiny panels and are quite strong in the Mendip area, and Labour's very strong in this area, some areas of Taunton. So continuing the inclusive approach, I would have said, is very important, particularly in the roles of scrutiny.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, and one that we would wish to make. I don't know whether Mr. Brown or Mr. Hellard wishes to comment.
I would just say Leader, that yeah, I mean, in terms of the joint committee, obviously it's an executive joint committee, so it needs to be made up of members of the executive, but certainly the intention is that the scrutiny committee will be open to a much wider membership. So there is most definitely a role there for the wider membership.
Thank you. Councillor Revens.
Good morning, Mr. McGinty. Similar question, first of all, to the one that Councillor Smedley raised, yes, the composition of the Scrutiny Committee will be quite thorny. Do we have a timeline on when we will see that proposed composition yet?
Yep. So we are looking to organise a special council meeting next month. We are hoping to have some consultation before that time. So hopefully by the end of this month, certainly we will have agreed between the monitoring officers, as it were, the terms of reference, and we'll then look to go to wider consultation with a view to taking it to council in November. As I said, it is a decision of full council because it's a non-executive function. So,
and a decision of all 5 full councils. So
yes, yes.
What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Bob, for your explanation that the joint committee will be a public body in terms of how it functions. Can I just check whether the arrangements will be hybrid as well, given the nature of the pandemic that we're still expecting to be through over the next few months? So will people be able to participate in it who don't feel comfortable about attending those meetings?
Thank you, Bill, for raising that. It's not been part of our discussion, but I will take that back and say that we need to make sure that people can come in remotely and participate in light of the current circumstances.
Thank you. And my third and final question: the joint committees, I understand, will be in place until the structural change order brings in the shadow or continuing authority in April. Does that mean that there would be different scrutiny arrangements as well as different joint council arrangements from that date in April that you mentioned, which I forgot to write down?
So it's anticipated that the systems that we put in place here will probably just flow on into the structural changes order. So if we get it right through this discussion, then the MHCLG are likely to pick up our arrangements, from here through to into the structural changes order.
And do you think that the Department of Levelling Up will as well?
Indeed, yes. I can't remember what have they got an acronym yet?
I've only just learned MCHLG.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Slocum.
Thank you, Leader. It was just a clarification, really. I'd just like to thank yourself, Bob, and Steve for putting this together, because it is absolutely, so just a slight clarification. On the joint committee, the leader is now the SCC leader. Then there's 4 other members of the SCC that will be on the joint committee. I'm assuming they would be executive members chosen from that. And then it would be the leaders of each 4 districts remaining, the leaders, which gives us a 5-4. The deputy leader, do they give us an extra one for the deputy, or is that taken from the districts? It's a bit of a cheeky question. I just wanted to know, because if it's going to be, just supposing now, it's talk frank, if it's supposing to be the county council leader now that will lead us on, then we want to have one of the deputies as one of the leaders of the districts, don't we?
So it's an executive committee, so it has to be made up of members of the executives. So you're quite right. The leader of the county council will be the leader, plus 4 members of the county council executive, together with the 4 leaders of the districts. That's the proposal for the 4 leaders of the districts. I mean, obviously there is the ability to have substitutes in the event that one of the leaders is unable to attend. I'm not sorry.
So if I may, leader, so one of those leaders will be chosen as a deputy.
Each of the district council leaders has the ability to substitute somebody for the committee, and that will be a district appointment from the executive. the county council leader has the ability to appoint substitutes from the county council executive.
No,
Jill,
sorry, that's
so
not what I
I
meant,
think I
sorry.
understand what you mean. You're meaning the deputy leader of the joint committee.
Yes, that's what I meant.
Yes, yeah. So I mean, obviously that will be a that will be a decision for the joint committee itself. But the only requirement in the terms of reference is that the leader of that committee is the leader of the county council.
Yeah.
Okay, but the decision as to who is the deputy leader of that joint committee will be a matter for the joint committee at their first meeting.
Yeah, thank you. That's super. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry about that, Jill. Yeah, and I will say that we are currently lobbying for the deputy of that committee to be a district council leader.
Absolutely. Yeah, of course. Thank you. That's super. Could we have the slides as well, leader? Would it be possible to have those slides, Steve, or just for the
Yes, of
executive?
course. Yeah.
That'd be really helpful. I've made a lot of notes, but thank you, leader.
Thank you. I can see. Councillor Filmer.
Thank you, Leader. I might be getting too detailed, but I was going to ask, in terms of the scrutiny committee, will that be subject to any of the sort of Widdicombe rules about trying to work out the makeup of it?
Yes.
In short.
Yes, in short.
It will need to be politically balanced.
Proportionate, yeah.
Across the piece.
Thank you. So someone's going to have an interesting job of working out the balance between the various councils. Okay.
Yeah.
Fine.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions, members? Okay, then perhaps I will come back to the recommendations, which I'm happy to propose. I mean, clearly, we would have preferred not to have been here, but we are where we are, and we need to be round the table in order to make a difference and protect our communities. And I think this is probably the best method of doing so at this present time until we hear from the government. So, Councillor Slocum.
I'm happy to second that recommendation, leader.
Thank you. So the recommendation has been moved and seconded. Are there any against? Any abstentions? Mr. Melchiorish.
Thank you very much. And that is a unanimous recommendation to you, Leader, to agree the establishment of the joint committee and also to delegate authority to the Chief Executive to make any minor amendments to the terms of reference.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm happy to so endorse. Thank you. Right, members, moving on then to agenda item 9, which is the draft Gravity Local Development Order, LDO, and this is to have the ability for statutory consultation. Who's going to kick off first, Mr. Bamsley or Mr. Hewlett?
Me.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, how could you forget me? Goodness me.
Sorry, Councillor Slocum.
Thank you, Leader. As I am the Inward Investment and Growth Portfolio holder, but thank you. I'd just like to say I'm really just want to, I'm not going to give a massive introduction today because I just want to pay homage to immense work that's been done by Stuart Hewlett on this draft document. The benefits of the LDO are immense. It simplifies the planning process, removing the need for lots of planning permissions where appropriate, not totally, just where appropriate, reduces pressures on resources and providing greater certainty and making investment on the site a more attractive way by helping with the delivery of the development. There's a lot more to this, so I feel that there will be a presentation, and plus Stuart will, as you can see the presentation now, really is interesting, and I'd like to reserve the right to come back at the end, Leader. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
Good morning, members. There's nothing like being thanked before the presentation, and no pressure. I should say that in terms
Have you got a microphone on or not? It's just, you're very quiet, Stuart.
Am I? Let me turn it up a bit. Not like me. I'm normally quite loud. Is that better?
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you. Yep.
Okay. So as Jill says, I've got a presentation. Unfortunately, it is a little bit on the long side, but I will try and get through it. But it does include some important information. So, as Councillor Slocum's outlined, this morning's report is about seeking the approval for the draft local development order for the Gravity Enterprise Zone, in order that it can be placed onto public consultation, which is a statutory part of the process of preparing the local development order. I'm hoping the presentation is useful. It will hopefully provide a bit of a recap on the role and purpose of local development orders broadly, but also set out a bit more detail as to why we felt the need to prepare one for the Gravity Enterprise Zone. It sets out a bit about the preparation process and then gives an overview of the contents of the draft local development order and the substantial amount of supporting documentation that goes with it. In doing so, the presentation doesn't go over the history and the background of Gravity, because there have been a number of member briefings and updates over the years, and all that is referenced within the report if members do need that. But I think we probably all know where the Gravity Enterprise Zone is by now. So to recap then, what are local development orders? They're locally focused planning tools that planning authorities can use to effectively grant planning permission for specific types of development or use classes within a defined geographical area. The intention of them is to streamline the planning process by removing the need for developers to make a planning application through the traditional means, and instead proposals are assessed in terms of their compliance against development zones, development parameters, conditions and other requirements set out in the relevant LDO. I guess the probably best way to sort of describe them are being similar to mini local plans. They're prepared as a written report in draft first and based on relevant evidence base and technical assessment, and then subject to statutory public consultation, and then they go through a process of adoption by the local planning authority. Government have increasingly encouraged the preparation of LDOs over the years, particularly on the basis of their benefit in simplifying the process, where it's appropriate and proportionate to do so. They also provide a high degree of flexibility in that they can apply to a range of different sites and development types, rather than prescribing like a planning application does, prescribing or dealing with a single scheme solution, which then are more difficult to change or amend. In being simpler and more flexible, they obviously have benefits in terms of reducing resources, both for the developer in putting together detailed schemes, but also for the local planning authority and how schemes are then ultimately assessed and determined based on it being an assessment of compliance rather than assessing each proposal from start each time. As a result, it does mean they can bring forward proposals quicker and with a greater deal of certainty, because developers will know that provided they're meeting the requirements of the LDO, a scheme is likely to be supported, rather than through a more traditional planning application process where the certainty only really comes at the end when you get the final decision. As a consequence, LDOs are more attractive for inward investment on that basis. It also means the site can come forward quicker, and then regeneration is brought forward through an LDO rather than having to wait for a 5-yearly local plan cycle, particularly if there's a need to change strategic policies or the status of sites. So it does have that ability to move things quicker as well. One of the key things importantly to remember is that for the LDO to come into force, it does require it to be adopted by the planning authority. So ultimately we do take the key role in the statutory process, and the movement towards statutory consultation and adoption is a key transition point from where we are with the Gravity LDO, which has been effectively Gravity funded and led in terms of preparing. It now moves to us to take it through the statutory process. So ownership and buy-in is absolutely critical. Once in place, as I say, subsequent proposals that come forward are assessed against the compliance with the LDO rather than through planning applications, and the intention being that because it should be a shorter process, that determination time, target times are reduced, and there is the opportunity to locally set planning fees. Okay, so just moving to the rationale for a local development order for the Gravity site. Members will recall back in July last year, the executive approved the principle of preparing an LDO, and the principle included it to be funded and prepared by Gravity. In agreeing to that, we did identify or acknowledge there were a number of potential benefits of an LDO to the Gravity project, In particular, we recognised the LDO could be beneficial in accelerating delivery of the enterprise zone, particularly at a time, in terms of that context, July last year, in the middle of COVID recovery, clearly the need for climate action and the uncertainties associated with Brexit. There's also always been significant support for Gravity's vision of a smart campus, which is focused on clean and inclusive growth objectives and the creation of higher value jobs, which runs central to our corporate priorities and our economic development strategy as well, and the transformational benefits that can bring to the local economy. In practical terms, preparing an LDO also allowed for the opportunity to align the site, the consented site, with the enterprise zone boundaries. So being able to change the site boundaries to include the enterprise zone extent was an important part of it. And also it allowed us to embed some of the objectives for the smart campus as well. It was recognised that as well that an LDO approach for the site would be more market facing and potentially attractive to international investment opportunities. In terms of flexibility again as well, though, also the opportunity to be able to respond to strategic opportunities which are cropping up, and given the scale of the site, the largest in the country, if not the largest brownfield site in the country, ready for redevelopment, able to pick up on emerging interest in things like gigafactories, national biomedical facilities, etc. So flexibility of the LDO allows us to respond to those market demands and inquiries more quickly. As a consequence, the executive supported the need for the Gravity-funded LDO, but it was caveated to ensure that it was based on clearly defined and shared objectives, was shaped by the local community, and with the LPO owning and adopting the final LDO, which we would have to anyway. As I say, that is part of the process. So what's happened since July? So in terms of July, since July last year, this slide provides an update on the preparation progress of the LDO. As I say, whilst it's being funded and prepared by Gravity using Stantec as the key technical support, there has been a high level of collaboration with the Council through regular meetings and discussions, and members will be aware of executive and member briefings that have been given on progress to date. There have been monthly LDO delivery group meetings held with consultees, agencies and partner organisations, and the Council and Gravity have sat on those and had key roles at those meetings, and that's given the ability to update on likely market demands, occupier requirements for the site, development of parameters and design concepts for the site, as well as enabling technical updates. And they've been key forums really in developing and testing the LDO proposals as they emerge. There have been regular Gravity newsletters and a range of webinars across a range of topics to keep the local community and stakeholders informed as far as possible. And there was also an informal consultation events held. There were also informal consultation events held in June, hosted by Gravity on the emerging LDO material, including the potential for large-scale advanced manufacturing, use of the rail, and the concept of the integral smart campus, and the potential for residential and community use on the site. More recently, focus has turned to the preparation of technical information, including the need for an environmental statement and the material to support the LDO, including a design guide, mitigation checklist, conditions, and Section 106 heads of terms. As the report highlights, the report did identify that there was still some outstanding documentation to come to us. As an update, much of the material has now been provided to the Council. It is under review by us, so the review process is still ongoing, with a view to hopefully be able to finalise documentation shortly, and then to be made available for public consultation. But we won't start that consultation until obviously we've finalised all that material. So as I said, it's an important stage really that we've reached now. We're seeking the executive approval to undertake statutory consultation on the draft LDO, and by that the Council will be taking ownership of the statutory process from here on in to adoption. This is the most attractive slide I've ever produced, and members may recall that I did set out the likely description of development at an exec briefing in June of this year. It's important that the LDO does define the uses that would be considered permitted under the LDO, but also it forms the basis for the environmental impact assessment and therefore allows the development to be tested in terms of impact, and also to form and establish the development parameters. including maximum floor spaces, building heights, etc. for the site. As you can see, the description of development in the LDO includes a wide range of uses, and that's based on the need for large-scale enabling engineering works as set out in section A on the slide, the known market demand for large-scale advanced manufacturing, which accounts for section BI on the slide, and up to 1 million square metres of commercial floor space across a range of uses, so substantial levels of development. With BII providing for a range of buildings up to 100,000 square metres, again across a wide range of uses, to help form what you would expect a smart campus to deliver, so that would include commercial, hotel and leisure uses. And then related to this, under BIII, up to 750 homes as part of the wider smart campus to provide for worker accommodation on the site. The final element of the description sets out the need for the associated infrastructure, would include the restoration of the railway line, energy generation, distribution, digital infrastructure, car parking, water and green infrastructure, and landscaping and access roads, etc. I think it's fair to say on its own, the description development permits a significant range and quantum of development. However, it's important to stress that this is overlain by other requirements within the LDO, which will include the management documents such as design guidance, mitigation checklist, and the development parameters plans, which are important because they provide the spatial principles for development of the site under the LDO, and I've got a few of those to run through across the next slide. So, a very important element of preparing the LDO has been understanding the market intelligence and the types of market demand and occupier demands that Gravity site would attract given its scale. Parameters, as well as forming the basis for the environmental assessment, they do set the envelope for which future development proposals will need to fit and be considered under the LDO. So, for example, they set out how land uses should be distributed across the site, as you can see from this slide here. They also set the maximum building heights and identify where some of the key infrastructure should go, and I'll split those out into the separate parameter plans in a moment. So this one's dealing with land use. It sets out, as I say, where particular uses should be accommodated across the site. I'll start with the yellow zone, which is obviously the largest part. It identifies the areas of the site where large commercial uses, including those to accommodate large-scale advanced manufacturing uses, should be located alongside associated infrastructure, including rail, both freight and passengers. You'll recall the description of development identified up to 1 million square metres for these groups of uses, so that's why it's a substantial part of the site. To the east, the pink zone would accommodate any energy distribution and management infrastructure, which would support not only the large-scale commercial, but also the site as a whole. The green zone to the south would accommodate a wide range of commercial, leisure, education, hotel, residential uses, supporting that sort of wider supplier park and smart campus approach, and accommodating the bulk of the 100,000 square metres of other smaller scale commercial uses that are identified in the description of development. The blue zone to the west is shown as an area to accommodate sport, leisure and community uses, and would also be seen as sort of an entrance to the site. And then the purple zone to the southeast is shown as accommodating where the worker accommodation could go with related community uses. So within each of these zones, there would be flexibility as to how particular uses are distributed, provided they don't exceed the upper floor space limits identified in the description of development and the schedule of uses that forms part of the main local development order document. Next parameters is building heights. So again, it shows the maximum building heights within zones across the site. This is identified based on ensuring buildings respond to site context. As a general rule, the heights increase towards the centre of the site and are low as you get towards the existing communities. I'm just conscious the key's not that clear, so I will try and run through the main heights that you can see. So starting with the blue zone on the south here, the heights are set at 9 metres generally, which is a reasonably domestic scale, but it also allows for no more than 5% of that zone to go up to 12 metres in height, and that's to allow for key buildings at focal points, etc. As I say, that's 9 metres, 12 metres, relatively in keeping with the existing development closest to the site. Green zone to the north rises slightly to a maximum height of 12 metres, and then it goes up in the yellow zone to 15 metres in as you move away from sort of existing development, so it allows the height to increase. Then approaching the centre of the site, the orange zone, starts seeing some more significant height, as you would expect with, as the commercial units get larger as part of that supplier park. So that would go up to a maximum of 23 metres. And then reaching the highest point in the centre of the site, the pink zone, corresponding with where the large-scale advanced manufacturing uses would be located, and a maximum building height of 35 metres, which is a substantial building, equivalent to an 8 or 9 storey building. Just to give members a sort of impression of what that might look like. In addition, that zone also provides a further 25 metres in addition for any stacks that might be required. So clearly, the draft LDO is suggesting significant height in this part of the site, which is set away from the existing communities, and it does step up. It's not something that is sat in isolation. It would step up through height across the site. The environmental statement does identify the sensitivities of this in respect of landscape and visual impact, and identifies a significant adverse effect, which obviously would need to be weighed against the major economic benefits of securing large-scale advanced manufacturing facility for the site and the wider benefits of the locality. I think it's really important because you can look at this plan and think that's a very large pink building of 1 million square metres at 35 metres high. It is not a building, it is a parameter, so it's setting a maximum parameter. It doesn't mean that a single building of that scale would be acceptable or indeed wanted by the occupier at that scale. The role of the design guide is critical in this, in addressing how scale and massing as a design requirement is important, how it manages proposals as they come forward through the LDO process, and how the impact can be managed and mitigated appropriately, particularly in context of the environmental impact assessment. We are still awaiting the next draft of the design guidance, but we have specifically requested that the final version does provide assurance regarding this issue. So how you deal with buildings of substantial height and whether that's breaking it up into different buildings, etc., or using innovative design is something that could be picked up as part of that design guidance. Just to finish the slide, the bits I haven't talked about are the lighter pink zones, which set much lower at 11 metres as a parameter, but that's mainly aimed at accommodating the infrastructure rather than buildings itself. So that would include things like the rail infrastructure, gantries for cranes, etc., that might be required in the northern zone, and green infrastructure, sports and leisure in the southwest corner. This parameter plan I've just shown deals with strategic transport infrastructure. It sets out the primary vehicle access points and movement corridors. You may be able to make out the dotted lines around the blue and purple lines. That's effectively a centerline deviation of 30 metres that allows for some flexibility on how you provide those routes. Parameter only covers the main routes. Ultimately, any development will have a series of internal streets and connected movement corridors, which will be guided by the movement principles that will be included within the design guidance. In terms of the actual parameter, what it's showing then, it's showing the link road, obviously in green here, which is pretty much substantially complete. It should be complete by the end of this month. And then a dotted green arrow for the access, the main access into the site. And then the orange arrows are showing secondary accesses into the site, and the blue arrow to the east identifying emergency access. Purple and blue lines then show the sort of strategic movement corridors potentially across the site, the purple one being maybe an HGV route, and then the blue being the sort of more domestic car vehicle journeys, etc. The black line around the top it represents the rail corridor for passenger and rail freight to be reinstated on the site. So if you had an app, so for instance, if a proposal came forward for the rail line, then effectively, if it was broadly in that location, then it's something that could go through the compliance process rather than requiring a planning application in its own right under the LDO scenario. Alongside the strategic transport routes, there's also a parameter plan showing provision of micro-mobility connections across the site. So again, in keeping with the smart campus approach and looking to reduce car and HGV movements, you would look to try and enable different forms of smarter travel, such as autonomous vehicles, e-bikes, electric scooters, etc. Corridor that you can see, the blue dotted corridor, would be an important corridor in linking key spaces, and particularly to the train station, for example, and that's the intention of what the parameter plan is trying to demonstrate. Unlike the strategic transport, the alignment of these routes aren't fixed, but they do show that design intention for future occupiers to consider. But obviously, micromobility is an important part of the smart campus ethos. And then the final parameter plan I was going to show was just a strategic landscape plan. Again, sets out key design features for the landscaping of the site. As you would expect, structural tree and woodland planting, the green space around its perimeter, pocket gardens, park areas, sporting, recreation and leisure across the site, and a green edge along Lavington Road. Landscape corridors across the site as well, and also identifies some areas where potentially important focal green space and placemaking focal could be created, for which high quality landscaping would be expected. So again, it gives an overview of what we would expect in terms of helping the development assimilate into its context. Obviously, within those individual parameter plans, there is a great deal of flexibility as to how the development could be built out in future under the LDO, with only those key matters set that would require assessment of compliance for future proposals. As a result, a number of different development scenarios could emerge, but in order to provide some graphical representation for members, but also for the consultation process, a concept plan has been drawn up that overlays those sort of parameters to provide a potential outcome for the site, and that's what you can see on the slide at the moment, and one that embeds the sort of smart campus approach. So just quickly going through the key parts of this, so focused in the middle on the large floor space of the advanced manufacturing in the site. It shows it as a single building, as I said, it doesn't necessarily need to be a single building, but served by freight and passenger rail line, a station, the supporting uses around it, providing a supplier park, a range of commercial, residential and community uses around it, and then linked by the strategic movement corridors, micromobility corridor as well, and opportunities for parkland recreational uses, as well as creating a clear arrival and well-being area at the front of the site, all set within the strong landscape context which the landscape parameter was seeking. So hopefully the plan is useful at least to give a graphical representation of what the description of development, how the perimeters could fit together. So moving on to the actual consultation material then, as I said, there's a range of documents and material that will need to be made available for public consultation. Most important being the draft local development order itself. This sets out the purpose and principles of the LDO and also includes a statement of reasons to underpin the rationale for its approach. It also critically embeds that description of development and the parameters plan so that it identifies the development that is permitted by the LDO, as well as setting out conditions to ensure development is acceptable both in planning and procedural terms, and also includes heads of terms for the Section 106 agreement to legally secure the relevant planning obligations, requirements and mitigation. The draft LDO will also include a compliance application form so that people can see how the assessment of proposals would take place against the LDO. Second document, there's also a requirement to publish an environmental statement, as I've said. This does present the findings of an environmental impact assessment and identifies the likely significant adverse and beneficial effects arising from development parameters, and also identifies those design, construction and management measures and appropriate mitigation where necessary. In the case of the LDO, the Gravity LDO, the environmental statement sets out chapters on what you would expect to be the key technical aspects, so transport, socioeconomics, flood risk, water management, landscape and visual impact, ecology, etc. It also includes a non-technical summary, or will include a non-technical summary when we get to consultation, that provides a concise and hopefully more accessible overview of the main aspects of the environmental statement. Third important document is the design guide, which I've alluded to already in the presentation. This is an important management tool, the LDO. The design guide will set out the design principles and requirements that subsequent proposals will need to demonstrate compliance with, as well as setting up good design practice for the site as a whole. It will also include a design checklist, so hopefully to enable developers to recognise easily and quickly the importance of design matters and understand the requirements of how proposals should respond to their setting and context. Fourth document, mitigation checklist, pulls together all the required mitigation identified within the environmental statement, the technical assessments and the design guidance, and provides a checklist similar to, I suppose, a list of conditions for future proposals to deliver. And then behind all that, there's a range of other supporting documents which have helped inform the preparation of the LDO, including a housing paper, baseline, skills charter, energy strategy, and a locality investment plan. As highlighted in the report, some of this material does remain under preparation review, and therefore consultation won't be able to commence until this has been finalised. Since writing the report, as I say, we've seen a great deal of material underpinning the LDO and are positive that we will soon have all the required information and confidence in it to enable the council to start the consultation in due course. In terms of the actual process of consultation and next steps, this is my last slide, you'll be pleased to hear. The regulations do require that the council publish the draft LDO, the environmental statement and the other required information on the website to make it available for inspection in the offices for no less than 28 days, so 4 weeks. We also need to publish a notice in the local newspaper and notify statutory consultees and interested parties. And this would be based on who would normally have been notified if a more traditional planning application was submitted. We do anticipate the consultation period will be for the 4 weeks, the minimum required by the regulations. However, we will need to keep this under review depending when the consultation begins, subject to finalising the material, but also consultee capacity and the ability to respond to any issues that arise as part of the consultation. Proposed process of how we undertake the consultation is currently being considered, but it's likely to include attendance at parish meetings, technical consultee workshops and community drop-in sessions. And I think given we've got a bit of delay before we're going to start the consultation, we will use that time wisely to warm up some of those key consultees and establish with the parishes how they wish to what they wish from us in terms of consultation, etc. We also have an outstanding matter that we do need to consider at what level we set our planning fees and our target determination times for dealing with the compliance applications, because obviously the national planning fees won't bite because they won't be a planning application, they will be a compliance assessment. The indication is that those should be incentivised. You should be incentivising those through lower fees and quicker turnaround times. We do need to give some further thought on this, and we can only probably do that once we get the full picture of the information that will be required in judging compliance once the documentation is finalised. Though, 8 weeks and a discounted fee, rather than in some cases they use a basic flat fee, are likely to be preferred and would seem to have some precedence looking at other LDOs. As I keep saying, these matters and the finalisation of all the material will need to be determined prior to the statutory consultation period commencing. There's absolutely no intention to drip feed. In terms of consultation, we need a full package to be able to go out to the public on. Following the end of the consultation period, all representations that are received will be considered, and then any modifications made to the draft LDO as required before then moving forward to the adoption process, which we anticipate could be before the end of this year. I'm sorry, that was a bit of a trawl through, but hopefully it does give members an overview of what we're likely to be going out on consultation with shortly, and it does cover those key sort of spatial parameter plans. Thank you.
No, thank you very much for what is a very comprehensive briefing at that point. Very helpful. Just to remind members, this is the point at which whether we decide whether we can go out to consultation, and consultation, as has been mentioned, will include statutory and other bodies, open for all, including the rail companies, to make comment on it as well. I don't know, Mr. Bamsey, if you wish to say anything, or Councillor Slocum.
No, thank you, Leader. I'm more than happy to help members with any questions they may have this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Slocum.
Yes, Duncan. Obviously, there are the two recommendations, which obviously I'd put forward at the right time if no one has anything they wish to say. But I think it shows that this is the statutory consultation. We are very, very thorough in Sedgemoor, there's no doubt about that. And thanks, Stuart, again, very, very much for the work that's gone ahead with this. I think that we're all very, very clear I think that's the one thing we want to do, is make sure this is transparent and we're clear to move forward with the consultation. So I will move the recommendation as and when required by you.
Thank you. Okay, let's open it up to debate and questions. Councillor Keane.
Thank you. Towards the end of your drawings, the plans that were put up, there is one part where there's a railway station. Could we have some more information, if not now, but at a later stage, as to whether, because it's so close and it's between both Highbridge and Bridgewater stations, which are extremely well used, whether that particular station would have any impact on the railway company's plans to continue the maintenance and or redevelopment or upgrading those existing stations. Because when thinking positive, when this comes to being, there will already be a massive increase in population, both north and south of the site, and many will be using public transport to access both leisure and their working. So it would be helpful, I think, before it goes out to the general public, if that could be included, some forward thinking there. Thank you.
Yeah, Stuart, I don't know whether you can comment on that. Yeah.
Happy to come back. I mean, I think the key thing is to say is that the LDO is making provision for the rail restoration and freight and passenger rail. It isn't a definitive, you know, it will depend on the proposals that come forward from potential occupiers as to whether that's delivered. I mean, the feasibility of the railway has been looked at and considered feasible to come back. The impacts on existing existing rail network would need to be considered at that time. I think it would be too early to say there's any of that detail at that stage, but it would be obviously a positive in terms of the site and in terms of trying to reduce the need for travel as well.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other members, comments, questions, or? No? Okay. I mean, this it's a massive site, members, and if it gets and when it gets developed, it will be certainly a star on the landscape, one way or another. But right, members, the recommendations have been moved. I'll second them to go to consultation. Are there any against? Are there any abstentions? Mr. Milhughes.
Thank you very much, Leader. That looks to be a unanimous recommendation across to you now to approve the LDO for formal consultation and also delegated authority to the Assistant Director to make any changes, minor drafting changes.
Thank you. Let me think. Yep, I'm happy to endorse the two recommendations. Thank you very much. Thank you. Right, members. Thank you very much, Stuart. And Stuart, I'd just also like to publicly thank you for the support and information you gave me during the last week when I was elsewhere looking at planning services in other local authorities. That was really much appreciated and enabled me to make a far better informed input into the process, and I'm very grateful for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Always happy to say how wonderful we are at planning at Sedgemoor.
Quite right. Thank you, Stuart.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, Stuart. Thank you.
Okay, moving along then to agenda item 10, which is our revised write-off policy report and write-off policy, and we're joined by Anne-Marie Hardy. Welcome. I think all I will say is the report's there for your approval. It clearly has been updated from when we had it before, and it addresses the current situation and legal requirements. Anne-Marie, over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Yes, hopefully should be fairly straightforward. What I'm today putting towards members is our revised write-off policy, which is the general ways in which us as a council make decisions in regard to all debts owed to the council, So we're talking council tax, non-domestic rates, sundry debts, housing rents, overpayments of housing benefit. So it's the general principles that we all use when making those decisions to make sure we make consistent and fair decisions when we've come to the end of our recovery routes and we're no longer able to have any action in order to recover them.
Thank you. Right. Members, any comments or questions? Councillor Slocum.
Thank you. I'd just like to say, Anne-Marie, it's very important, I think, to have a policy like this in place. And none of us want to see write-offs, but it has to be. And I think to have something formalised like this in the way that you've done it is really good and well done to you. And I would like to move the recommendation.
Thank you very much.
And whilst I say we have a write-off policy, we also have the ability to reclaim monies that are owed to the council should we become aware of any changes in circumstances.
Correct, yes.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Keane.
Thank you, Leader. I also would like to say how much I appreciate this, and also to agree with Anne-Marie's statement that we do everything we possibly can. Citizens' Advice have highlighted week after week after week that the incidence of personal debt never diminishes, and some weeks it actually is more queries on personal debt than on the initial applications to universal credit, which is always very high. So I fully support the council's stance on this subject.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members' comments or questions? No, in that case, the policy recommendation has been moved and seconded. Are there any against? Any abstentions? Mr. Melchiorish.
Thank you very much. And again, that's a unanimous recommendation over to you, Leader, to approve the council's write-off policy.
And I'm happy to endorse the council's write-off policy. So done. Right, members, I think that brings us about the end of our business today. Thank Anne-Marie for her attendance, along with all our other officers and input that we've had today. Thank you very much. We've got through an awful lot of business, and I'm grateful for your attendance, members. So there being no further business, I declare the meeting closed, and thank you, Andrew.